When I was growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, I remember being constantly confronted with these waif-like models in magazines and on TV. Heroin chic and its remnants were very much the vibe of the time. And there was no getting away from it. Even the actresses in popular sitcoms we all used to watch appeared to have succumbed to this unrealistic beauty standard. And I just thought these women all naturally looked like that. Thin, with perfect skin. It didn't quite register with me that there was probably some Photoshop involved in creating these perfect images. It wasn't too dissimilar from what we face today on popular platforms such as Instagram, where Facetune and filters appear to have become the norm. Except back then it was less pervasive. It wasn't constantly popping up on my mobile phone that I carried around with me, the device that you go to bed with and wake up to. There wasn't always another perfect image of a perfect body on a perfect beach. Except it was enough to be toxic. And like so many other girls back then, I started controlling my food and exercising too much. Turns out I was really good at shrinking myself down. And one day I ended up in the doctor's office after having some blood work done. And the doctor sat me down and said, "Emerald, I've bad news for you. You have to go from here straight into the intensive care unit in the hospital because you are severely potassium deficient." Now you can imagine that was really scary for me, and I was shocked, but I was also really confused because I did not know what that meant. Turns out potassium is an essential mineral in our bodies, and it functions as an electrolyte. And one of the things it does is it controls your heartbeat. If you're severely potassium deficient, it can lead to heart failure. So I was incredibly lucky that it was discovered and that it was managed. However, that night, I did find myself in a hospital bed, hooked up to all sorts of machines, and everything around me was beeping, and I was terrified. And the reason I was there was because when they supplement you with high doses of potassium, it can put your heart under strain. And if you don't respond well to the treatment, it can lead to danger and it can put your life at risk. So every 2 hours, and I had to stay up for the entire night, every 2 hours the nurse would come up to me with a shot of this really salty liquid, and this was the potassium. And I remember with every shot I drank, this wave of panic would just rush over me, and I'd glance at the heart monitor, and I would just think, is this the shot that's going to kill me? And it wasn't quite like that tequila shot at 4 a.m. that could kill you the next day, which, to be fair, is a valid concern. But that night in the hospital, I had a lot of time to think. How did I get here? And why did I believe I had to be as small as possible to fulfill the big roles I imagined for myself in the future? The images I'd be confronted with for pretty much my entire life definitely played a part in those beliefs. However, it's important to realize that I had that experience just with the help of traditional media. That and my own personal desire to achieve were enough to land me in hospital. And in preparation to speak with all of you here today, it really made me wonder, how would I have fared if I had grown up now with social media? What if I had gotten so addicted to these services that are designed to get you hooked, that even though they made me feel worse, I would keep coming back to them? And what if the algorithms would have learned all about me so that they would target me with weight loss pills to speed up the process? I imagine it would have been so much more difficult for me to get well. And there is a lot of data out there now to suggest that it's hard to stay healthy online. I'm here today to talk to you about how the free services of the internet are having a terrible effect on our mental health, our relationships, and society as a whole, and what we might do to fix it. Now, I will use the term free services here to describe any service you use online that you don't pay for, but that makes its money from advertising. So think of some of the social media platforms, some search engines, publishers, that kind of thing. Now, these businesses, they're built on personal data. They make money from knowing what you're going to want next, do next, and think next. They keep you online to extract more data from you, to make their predictions more accurate and therefore more valuable to their customers, the advertisers. They exploit our innate human vulnerabilities, and we end up wasting a lot of our time. And for what? I want to pose to you one really important question, and it's as follows. Why do we not demand that these technologies serve humanity as opposed to undermine it? Now, in order to explain what is going on here, I'd like to do a little exercise with you. I want you to think about the last time you went into a shop to buy a pair of shoes. Think about yourself going into the shop, looking around, maybe trying a few pairs on, saying, those are great, I want to buy them. You then went to the till to pay for them, and you left the shop. And that was the end of the exchange between you and the shop owner. A similar thing happens when you get your car serviced. You bring your car to the mechanic, they fix your car, you pay them, you leave. That's the end of the service delivery. So, there's just two parties in that equation, you and the shop owner. But why don't we do that again? Except this time what we'll do is we'll apply the commonly used business model of those free internet services. So once again, you are in need of a pair of shoes and you head into a physical store to buy them. You immediately spot the ones you want and you go to the till and you see that there is no till. You're confused. So you go to the sales assistant for help and you say, could you please tell me where I can pay for these shoes? Completely expecting them to say, oh, the till is in the back or the till is upstairs, but they don't. Instead, they kind of stare at you blankly and say, what do you mean? The shoes are free. You don't have to pay for them. All we want to do is when you leave the shop, we want to put a tracking bracelet on your ankle, similar to what you'd see on a prisoner, so that when you leave the shop, we know exactly where you go, how much time you spend in each location, what other products you might be interested in, where you work, where you go to school, who your parents are. We'll then have this data, but we'll want to enrich it. So we'll approach a few data brokers who will sell us some more information about you. Perhaps a large chunk of your browsing history, some of your recent financial transactions, maybe your sexual preferences and relationship status. Who knows, we might even throw in your political inclinations. And then once we have this really accurate profile of you, we will sell it to the highest bidder, who will be able to target you with ads for anything and everything, including, but of course never limited to, more clothes, shoes, events, and maybe even information or news, whether it's true or not, surrounding referenda and important elections. But the shoes are free. Now that would be really weird, right? Except we seem to find this behavior completely acceptable online as long as the services we are being offered are free. It makes me wonder how well we truly understand what the extent of the tracking is. So, we should also talk about how we are spending our time, because we spend a lot of time online, and a lot of that time is being constantly interrupted with another notification or another email or something else. On average, globally, an internet user spends about 6.5 hours per day online. That's about roughly 100 days per year. If we extend that average across the entire internet user base of 4.4 billion users, we will learn that humanity will spend 1.2 billion years online in 2019. It matters what we do with those hours, those days, and those years. Imagine what we could achieve with 1.2 billion collective years put to good use. Do we want to be remembered as the people who face-tuned, or the people who destroyed the social fabric because we prefer to pay with our privacy than with cash? Or the people who chose profiling over a fair and transparent exchange? I do not believe that that is who we truly are. So we've looked at the mechanics of this in our shopping example. But now let's go a bit deeper and see what drives all of the parties that are involved in these exchanges. We need to talk about incentives. The famous computer scientist Jaron Lanier speaks frequently about the incentive problems of the internet. And he's right. These free services, they create an incentive dilemma. If we looked at that traditional shopping experience, we learned that there were just two parties, you and the shop owner, and the exchange of money happened between those two parties. So there was an incentive for the shop owner to do a good job at serving you, or you wouldn't come back. Now, if we looked at that second example, when we applied the business model of those free internet services, we learned that there's a third party. In fact, there's often hundreds of third parties. And the exchange of money happens between the third parties and the advertisers. You're not the customer. You're the user. You are an entity that is worth money when data is extracted from you, and you're then targeted with ads. We've learned from the past that ads are not always innocent. It's not just that cashmere jumper that is following you around the internet. It's not just that fitness class near you. It can get very dark very quickly when the ad does not reflect the truth and has a political angle to it. Or when the ad spreads hate speech in areas already prone to conflict, and then subsequently there's a genocide in that area. Or, bring it back to where we began, if the ad targets vulnerable individuals with weight loss supplements and plastic surgery. So, the advertisers are the customers. So there's obviously an incentive here for those free services to give the advertisers a product that's worth paying for, which is an accurate profile of you and how you're going to behave. So there's an incentive for them to keep you online as long as possible, to make sure you give up as much of your personal data as possible. We've learned now that the advertisers and those free internet services are making a bunch of money from all of this. But where is it leaving us, the users? Well, data shows it's leaving us rather distracted, lonely, depressed, manipulated, and exploited. And there's hundreds of examples we can look at here. But let's just take a look at the effects of the constant interruptions and notifications. In a 2013 study, it was found that the mere presence of your mobile phone can disrupt the connection between two people, having a negative effect on closeness, the connection you have together, and conversation quality. In another study from the University of Chicago done in 2017, it was found that the mere presence of your mobile phone, even when turned off, can reduce your cognitive capacity by taxing the attentional resources that lie at the core of both your working memory capacity as well as your fluid intelligence. Technology was supposed to support human flourishing. Instead, it is eroding our relationships and it's making us less smart. So, how do we go about fixing all of this? Well, I believe that there are two components to the solution. Remember when I said that we seem to be completely fine with this surveillance online as long as the services that are offered are free? That brings me to the first part of the solution. When a service you love starts offering a paid-for, ad-free version of that service, pay for it. We cannot keep pointing the finger at big tech anymore if we are not willing to pay them for the valuable services they provide us with. These are for-profit organizations. The money needs to come from somewhere. We need to show them that there's money to be made from using a traditional business model with just two parties without the need for a third-party advertiser. Only then will we go from being the user to becoming the customer again, and only then will that incentive change. The second part of the solution is, of course, a corporate responsibility. We need to build ethical technology, of which privacy friendliness is a vital component. But it's not just about more control or more transparency anymore. In fact, in quite an old study dating back to 2008, a researcher found that it would take the average internet user about 76 working days just to read all of the privacy policies they were subject to each year. To put that into perspective, that's about 3 years worth of holiday time for the average worker just reading privacy policies. That is ridiculous, and it's not sustainable. We need to build technology that's designed in line with the expectations of the users. No more surprise tracking and saying, oh, but it was in our privacy policy. Clearly that doesn't work. We also need to be daring, and we need to charge for our offerings, because only that way will we not have to rely on a third party to make the money. If the people pay you, you're making money and your business will generate revenue. I think we can all agree that it's gotten quite dark recently. And I truly believe that companies and consumers now need to come together and work for change. Because we're more lonely, we're more depressed, and we're more distracted than ever before. And it's keeping us from achieving our full potential. So, let's build and pay for technology that serves humanity, so that we can spend the limited time we do have here on the things that truly matter. Thank you.